I'm Dennis Anderson, and here's what's coming up on Almanac North. As local school districts make their back-to-school plans for the fall, many children are feeling anxiety and stress. We'll have some advice tonight to help kids deal with the unknowns of the pandemic. An Iron Range woman has published a new book to help explain COVID to children, and on the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, how it has changed lives and the work that is yet to be done. These stories coming up right now on Almanac North. Hello and welcome again to Almanac North. Thank you very much for watching. Julie Zenner is off tonight as we alternate hosting during the pandemic. This week's show was recorded on Thursday afternoon. Following guidance released by the State Education Department, Duluth Public Schools revealed its Return to Learn plan this week. The plan includes in-person learning, online education, and a hybrid of the two, and it could change as conditions dictate. Other school districts are also putting their plans in place for the coming school year, but the evolving plans can be stressful for kids and their caregivers. Joining us now is Molly Harney, Associate Professor of Early Childhood Development at the University of Minnesota Duluth. Molly, thank you very much for being with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Will you share for a few moments with our viewers the stress youngsters might be feeling about all this uncertainty about going back to school?
Sure. So one of the things to think about when we're considering the stress that children are experiencing is that it's different for every child. And so while all of them are in this storm, if we could call it that, of a pandemic, each child has a different way of coping, a different set of circumstances. So some children are weathering the storm with a yacht, some are in a rowboat, some have a raft, some are holding on to a floaty, and some are grabbing for driftwood that might be passing by. So that baseline experience becomes the predictor for where that base level stress might be. So while we're supporting children, it's important for all of us to be aware of the fact that all of them are experiencing this given storm, and all of them have different kinds of supports.
Are they picking up anxiety from their parents or caregivers?
They can be. And I think that one of the things we can be thinking about is recognizing the child's stress through the child's kind of developmental stage and validating it. So while we know that children are watching the adults and monitoring whether they're safe or not, one of the things we can do is recognize that the children are watching us, they're paying attention to our own stress levels, and they're determining some of their own sense of safety based on our reactions.
So in households with multiple children, could each child be in stress in a different way?
Absolutely. They're filtering it both through their temperament, their developmental age, and they're, again, looking upon the adults in their lives to partner with them to support what we call regulation, to help them settle into this new reality.
So can you give us some tips as how we can help them?
Sure. So recognizing the stress, acknowledging the stress, not minimizing it. There's an interesting balance, not making more of it as well. So to, again, speak at the developmental level of the child about their stress, ask them questions about their understanding of their situation. Having routine in children's lives is really, really critical for children who are in a situation that is generally stressful. One of the things that impacts stress for young children in general, is the inability to predict what is happening in their daily life. So the more the adults can put predictable, kind of regular patterns into their day, meaning there's a bedtime, there's an awake time, we go out and exercise each day, Meals are on a regular schedule. They're there for us kind of in a predicted way. So when children can predict their schedule, their environment, the daily events, it lowers that stress level. One of the things that happened when the pandemic brought us all home was it interrupted some of the regular patterns children had. So then the adults in their lives have this opportunity to bring those patterns back to give that predictability that then lowers that stress.
Some children will be distant learning from home, not going back into the classroom. But I would suspect socializing in the classroom is very important for a child in his learning, his or her learning.
So then what we need to do is make sure that children have opportunities to socialize. So one of the ways we lower stress levels is through community connection, through socialization. There, you know, when the pandemic first became an awareness for all of us, when physical distancing or social distancing, I should say, became an issue for all of us, it became really important for those of us who support children to talk about physical distancing, not social distancing. Stay connected. So if there are children who are experiencing isolation and they're not able to get to school, whether there's a health concern, whether the family can't get them to school, it doesn't match their schedule, making sure that we have ways in which all the children have a social connection, whether it's a FaceTime connection, it's online, which, you know, we want to balance physical connection as well as online connection.
So is there an indication that parents should be spending more time with their children, perhaps playing with them, reading to them, doing all sorts of other activities with them that perhaps wouldn't have been done?
I think it's an opportunity that we could embrace. I think that children are good at managing their own interests and going off and playing on their own, so I wouldn't suggest that now we hover. But I also think that there is an opportunity to read one more book before bed, take a longer bath, go for a walk in the woods before lunch, do things that we weren't able to do with children when they were in school.
Molly, there could be times when children are back in the classroom, then they're home again for distant learning. Then they're back in the classroom and home again. That's got to be tough for both the kids and the parents.
And again, creating those predictable patterns will be important. So parents knowing that there may be an ebb and a flow, this is a very fluid situation as we've heard from everyone. And so being aware of the fluidity of the nature of the issue and being able to pivot and say, okay, we're home again. What are our schedules? We're going to get up in the morning. We're going to have a breakfast together. We're going to study for a bit. Everybody exercise. So being aware of the importance of those predictable patterns.
We're almost out of time, but it sounds like this is going to be work, or can be work, for parents and for kids.
I think it could be identified as work, but I also think it can be an opportunity to think about the ways children learn, how they explore their environments. Making a cake is math. Building a birdhouse has a lot of learning. So where are the places that we are building upon how children naturally learn?
Well, I'm sure you've helped us out. Molly Harney, thank you so very much for being here.
You're very welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This week, we welcome a new member to the Almanac North team. Ramona Morozes joins WDSE WRPT as a multi-platform producer with over a decade of journalism experience. Ramona trained at the American Indian Journalism Institute and was a board member of the Native American Journalists Association. She graduated with a mass communications degree from St. Cloud State University and previously worked at WCCO in Minneapolis and KBGR and CBS in Duluth. Ramona talked with an Iron Range woman this week who is making it her mission to ease children's anxieties about the coronavirus pandemic.
Journalist Ramona Morozes here talking with Aurora, Minnesota author Renee Koreshek, who took the complicated topic of the coronavirus and has created a children's book to teach kids about social distancing and following pandemic guidelines. So Renee, let's start with, how did this idea for the book come about?
Well, back in April, I put a mask on Teddy and I hung him on the mailbox to remind people to wear their masks. And shortly after that, Tilda appeared and they became very good friends and got into all kinds of mischief. So then I started posting their antics on Facebook, and a lot of people who followed them said they like to start their morning. I posted at 6 o'clock in the morning, and that's how they would start their day, to see what Teddy and Tilda were up to. Then some of their followers suggested I did children's, and that's how the adventures of Teddy and Tilda, the Corona Bears, began. And the book opens up with Teddy and Tilda coming out of hibernation and finding the world in a pandemic and a whole new way of life for them. But they get through it. They found everybody else was wearing face masks. They went to school at home. They went to church at home. They played games with each other and read a lot of books. And they helped me make face masks. We made over 500 face masks and donated them to hospitals and assisted livings and gave to our friends. And they came to the post office with me and mailed them.
Can you please share with us what lessons the book provides?
They have to follow the rules, wear the mask, do the social distancing, and then things, hopefully they'll feel will be okay. So I wanted to ease the anxiety of the young children now with all of the stuff going on about the pandemic. And I wanted them to see how Teddy and Tilda lived through it, and they were playful and happy, and they learned how to wear a mask and social distancing and distance learning.
Why is it important to reach kids through creative ways, such as what you're doing with the book, to talk about the pandemic and difficult topics like this?
Because I think they're afraid of what they hear. And hopefully this book is showing them that life can go on and they can do the things that they did within reason, wearing their masks and stuff like that. I showed the book to some children and it just made my heart feel good because they were giggling when they saw all the things Teddy and Tilda were doing. And I've had a couple of adults read the book and they actually cried. My first great-grandchild is on the way, and there was a baby shower for him, and the invitation said not to bring a card, but to bring a children's book. Well, this was in the works, and my granddaughter, who's having the baby, didn't know. So when she opened up the package and saw the book, she goes, wow, a book. And when she opened it up and it's dedicated to her baby that's coming in September, she started to cry. And I started to cry. And everybody at the shower was crying. It's been received really well. Mostly grandparents and great-grandparents are buying the book for their, obviously, grandchildren and great-grandchildren. So the kids now can show their offspring what they lived through. Instead of going barefoot to school uphill all the way like we were told our grandparents did, they can tell their grandchildren that they lived through the pandemic of 2020.
Can you elaborate on that? What do you think being a child during the pandemic is like?
You know, a lot of them don't know any different. A lot of the kids, they have no idea, you know, the very young ones, this is the way they're living it now. But I know I hear school kids worrying, are they going to go to school 2 days a week or not at all? How is their graduation going to go? So it's a troubling time for most of them.
So what is your message to the community on getting through this and coming out stronger?
I guess we have to take it one day at a time and do what we feel is best for ourselves and for the people around us.
Oh, Renee, thank you so much for joining us. Keep up the good work.
Thank you for having us.
Now, if you want to learn more about the adventures of Teddy and Tilda, the Corona Bears, it's available at many local bookstores and beauty shops across the region. 30 years ago, the Americans with Disabilities Act was signed into law. Passage of the ADA changed the lives of people with disabilities, giving them access to public buildings and services. 30 years later, what has the impact been and what work is yet to be done? Joining us to talk about the ADA is Meredith Kujala, the Adult and Family Services Manager for ARC Northland, and Russ Stover works at North Country Independent Living in Superior. Welcome. Thank you both for being here. Beginning with you, Meredith, this year does mark the 30th anniversary since ADA. What was the importance, do you think, of what was accomplished with this act so long ago?
You know, what was accomplished was quite a bit. You know, it really opened the eyes, I think, of society, you know, showing that everybody deserves equality, and they didn't have equality and they didn't have equal access. So I think bringing it, you know, uproot and showing people, it really opened a lot of people's eyes, and it opened, you know, the country up.
Russ, do you think what happened with ADA has been accomplished, or is there still a ways to go?
Oh no, there's still quite a bit to do.
Like what?
I mean, we still need access to all public amenities, but there's always more things to do. And a lot of it is just that people are not knowledgeable about what is and what isn't acceptable. So there are organizations like ours to let people know that there's a different way to do things. And it does benefit everybody when the ADA is complied with.
But how did ADA change the lives of folks with disabilities?
It gave them equal access to things like housing, education, transportation, job opportunities, any public amenities. Those things are still being worked on all the time and changing, and especially in some of the smaller communities. Sometimes they don't have the money and the resources to catch up to codes, and just don't have the resources.
Mm-hmm. Meredith, what's your reaction to businesses maybe in this area who aren't in compliance with ADA? And there's got to be several areas where there is non-compliance.
Yeah, unfortunately, you know, there are. You would think, though, you know, with an act that's been 30 years old, you would think that everybody would be in compliance, but sadly, you know, there aren't.
Yeah.
Not all businesses are, and it's really, it's shocking. You know, when I come into a business or I see a business that isn't accommodating, they don't get my business, and you know, I try to educate those places and those business owners, because you know, it truly is unfair for individuals. And sometimes it's just that business owners don't know, you know, about the accommodations that they need to make. So it's really, you know, like Russ said, it's about the education, and keep talking about it and keep talking about it.
Are either one of you, and maybe both of you, still finding there are business owners or people who run a myriad of organizations who just aren't even aware of ADA?
Not as much as before. But what they don't know is the guidelines and what to do. And, you know, I certainly don't want to call out any names on public television.
Yeah.
But there's still people out there that either they just don't have the time and don't want to deal with it, or they just don't know.
Yeah. As a person with disabilities, do you feel you're treated differently?
You know, that's a good question. And I think having grown up my whole life with a disability, and never have been an able-bodied person, so many things just go over my head. Sometimes my friends will notice it around me and I won't.
Oh.
So it's like,
yeah.
I don't know, it is what it is. But the worst thing you can do, I'm glad you brought that up, because the worst thing you can do when you meet somebody with a disability is approach them with pity. And pity is the most disabling disability there is.
Yeah. Meredith, what about yourself? How do you react to that?
No, I can totally agree with Russ. You know, living with a disability my whole life, I know no different, obviously. I think, you know, my friends and family get disgusted more than I do sometimes, or see things that I might not see. It might go over my head, literally, or, you know, mentally. But I like to take those moments that I do see that discrimination as an education tool, especially with youngsters. You know, I can't blame any youngster for, you know, discriminating or staring or whatnot. So I take that as an education piece. Now, adults, that's a different story. And, you know, I try to educate as much as possible and try to keep that open mind that, you know, maybe some people just don't know or understand. But it definitely, you know, it still happens, unfortunately.
Do you sometimes, maybe both of you, get the feeling that, gosh, they should know better than that?
Well, you run into a few of those people.
Yeah.
But what I haven't noticed, you're talking about kids, Meredith, what I haven't noticed in my, what is going to be a longer life now, is that when I was younger and kids would just like stare and be absorbed with somebody in a wheelchair. It's like, mommy, what's that guy doing in there? And nowadays it doesn't seem like any big thing for children to see because of mainstreaming of people with disabilities in the schools. It's no longer unusual for a little kid to see someone in a wheelchair.
And thinking back to my early childhood and early school years, oftentimes if a child had a disability, they were sent elsewhere for education, weren't they? They weren't mainstreamed.
I'm one of those kids.
Were you?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was actually, Mr. Anderson, I was the first kid in a wheelchair mainstreamed into 709.
Really?
Yeah.
And so that has totally changed now, has it not?
Mm-hmm.
It absolutely has. And as one of my jobs at ARC Northland, I work with the special education, the 504 sections at schools, and making sure that these students are mainstreamed and are, still get the services that they need, but still, let them be mainstreamed with their peers and their other students so that they can feel that normalcy, and not be treated any differently.
So what is Northland Adult and Family Services? What is that?
ARC Northland Adult and Family Services.
Yeah, what is that?
Is we are an advocacy agency, or we're a nonprofit that works specifically for people with disabilities. And we have a variety of different services, from PCA services to housing to education and training, which is what I do. And so a big part of my job is getting out there and training, professionals, community member society about disabilities and, the ADA and how buildings need to be accommodating, and getting in those schools and making sure that these kiddos are, being mainstreamed like any other student and being treated fairly.
Are you finding people more willing to learn today that maybe they would shun this years ago?
I think it's gotten to the point now where everybody knows somebody with some kind of disability, so many times they want to be aware.
Yeah. Do you go out and give talks?
I have.
Okay.
I'm sure she has too.
Oh, absolutely. I think, just going out in the community, I'm giving a talk just, in my personal life.
Yeah.
And, we come about somebody that kind of looks at you funny. Well, let's talk about it instead of, walking away.
If, as a person with a disability, I asked you before if you feel like you're being treated differently. Do you outgrow that at all or no?
I don't know. I have a hard time recognizing sometimes, like I say. Sometimes I see it, sometimes I don't. But
I think when it's your norm, it's when all you know, you don't really, like you said, you don't see it unless, somebody's pointing it out at you. But when you, eat, sleep, and breathe it every day, it's just part of life, and, you accommodate.
If you had some advice for other people who are watching tonight who have disabilities, what would you say to them?
Persevere.
Such as? How do you mean that,
Well,
Russ?
just stay at it and keep consistent, and things will come out all right. But if you're looking for somebody that'll guide you in Superior, in the 8 counties in northern Wisconsin, they can look up northcountryil.org. And there's a list of services there, and some of them are, you can join groups and get on listservs with other people, and it's actually, there's a lot of things on there that can help people.
Okay, sure. Well, it's been 30 years since ADA. Let's hope in the next 30 years a lot more has improved. Yeah, thank you both for being here tonight. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
And all the best to both of you, and continue to do what you're doing. You're certainly helping the community.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you both very kindly. All right.
Thank you.
Now, finally tonight, we remember Don LARSON, who died last week. LARSON was a longtime advertising agency owner and former Duluth City Councilor. He was a tireless advocate for Duluth who seldom took credit for his work. In 2004, with his friend Manley Goldfein, LARSON published The Will and the Way, a book that documented key projects that helped Duluth emerge from the recession of the 1980s. A second volume of the book was published in 2018. This time LARSON partnered with former Duluth Mayor Don Ness. Don LARSON was 91 years old. And we encourage you to keep up with Almanac North by following us on social media. You'll find us on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter, and visit the WDSC website for program updates, upcoming events, and more information about the station. And don't forget to download the PBS Video App for on-demand viewing of your favorite programs. Thanks to our guests and the crew here in the studio. I'm Dennis Anderson. Stay healthy, everybody, and be kind.